name is Nicole. I'm a tea writer and educator, and I'm here to help you learn more about tea. I've had to take a little bit of a break from making videos, but I'm looking forward to getting back to sharing more content with all of you here. I had done a bit of reorganizing of my tea shelves behind me here, and one of my followers on Instagram spotted all of my tea books that take up the bottom shelves, and she requested a video showing all of them, so that's what I'm going to do today. Here is every tea book I own. They're not really in any particular order, so I'm just going to go through them as they are on the shelves. Let me know in the comments if there's any questions that you have on any of them, or I'd love to hear if any of these are some of your favorite tea books. First I have Tea Life, Tea Mind by Shoshitsu Sen. So this is written by the current Grandmaster of the Yorosenke School of Japanese Tea Ceremony. I really enjoy his style of writing. This one was a bit hard to find, but definitely recommend getting that. This is With Tea, which is a little journal full of recipes that my friend Alexis had published. She doesn't write her tea blog anymore, but I really enjoy having this around still. I used to work for Teavana, so I still have all of my old handbooks. This is kind of the older one just before I started working there, and then this is the one that was kind of the current handbook when I was working at Teavana. The Ancient Art of Tea by Warner Peltier. It's just kind of a collection of older writings about tea. A lot of these are things I haven't seen published elsewhere, so if you're really into historical tea texts, this is a good one to pick up for like a quicker read that still has some really cool older things to. How to Make Tea by Brian R. Keating and Kim Long. This is kind of like a basic intro to tea. I did think it had like a really cool kind of graphic style to it. Steeped in the World of Tea is a collection of different short stories, all relating to tea. Another really fun read, very light. I like to kind of like pick it up as a chapter at a time while I'm enjoying some tea. New Taste in Green Tea by Mutsuko Tokunaga. This is kind of more targeted towards Japanese tea. So they cover matcha, different ways of cooking with green tea. And I have the Teacupper's Notebook. So this is actually like a tea journal that had been sent to me. I don't think this is in print anymore. I've never actually used it. I tend to take all of my notes digitally, but I think it's still kind of cool. We have The Romance of Tea by William Euchers, annotated by James Norwood Pratt. So this is a very old tea book that was then redone with some additions from James Norwood Pratt. One thing I really liked about this edition is all of the photographs that they used to illustrate it, especially some of the historical things. A Little Tea Book by Sebastian Beckwith. This is one I definitely recommend for a lot of people who are just getting into tea. It looks little, but there's a lot of information jam-packed in here. It's beautifully illustrated, makes a really wonderful gift for somebody who's looking to get into tea. And I have The Tea Companion. This is a classic written by Jane Pettigrew. Definitely one that was important for me in the beginning of my tea journey, as I would kind of flip through it whenever I found a new tea to learn more about it as I drank. The Japanese Tea Ceremony by A.L. Sadler. This is a fairly thick book, but definitely has a lot of great introductory things to the Japanese tea ceremony. It really helped me understand the context of those things a lot more when I first got into making matcha myself. I have Steeped, Recipes Infused with Tea by Annelies Zitgerveld. This is a really great tea recipe book. Lots of really just very interesting recipes that I haven't really seen elsewhere, like cauliflower steaks and tomato soup with tea in it. Just really interesting tea cookbook. I met the author and she's also super sweet. Pour Tea, Ancient Caravans and Urban Chic by Jinghong Zhang. This is really your penultimate book about, if you're looking to get into that type of tea, this book really has so much information. It's one I use a lot for reference material. The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. This is a graphic novel that's really adorable and well done, and they're these super cute tea dragons, and I'm obsessed with them. And I have A Tea Reader, Living Life One Cup at a Time by Katrina Avila Municello. Katrina is a former tea blogger, so this book is kind of a compendium of her own writing as well as those of others. Definitely one I recommend picking up if you're able to find it. I haven't gotten to read this one just yet because it's quite a tome. First Step to Chinese Pour Tea by Chen Kampong. So this is basically a translation of a Chinese text that has a ton of information about pour. I did a group order for it through Tea Chat or Tea Forum, one of those. definitely looking forward to digging into this once I find the time to. The tea tasting journal that Mona from Teawala sent to me. Her tasting journal is so thoughtfully designed. I really like that it's spiral bound. If you're looking for something to manually take notes for tea in, this is definitely one to consider. A Tea Lover's Travel Diary, Phoenix Single Tree Oolong, and Tea Kuan Yin Oolong Tea by Jason C.S. Chen. Jason is the founder of CC Fine Tea, and this is really a photo diary of his travels in the Phoenix Mountains and looking for Tea Kuan Yin in China. Really stunningly beautiful photographs. There's quite a lot of like really detailed information about processing. I really thoroughly enjoyed this one. Tales of the Tea Trade by Michelle and Rob Commons. So this is the couple that owns Commons Tea. It's a really lovely narrative style, just talking about all of the different producers that they have relationships with, experiences they've had in places like India and Japan. I really enjoy this style of tea book as it's not kind of your basic, this is tea. It really gives you kind of an insider's perspective. The Book of Tea by Okakura Kakuzo. So this is one of the first books about tea I ever bought. I picked this up in the tea aisle of Wegmans way back at the beginning of my journey. I really love this edition that comes with like a little slipcover, a seminal read for anyone looking to get into tea. It's not exactly about tea itself, but more about the philosophy of tea, if that makes sense. 19 Lessons on Tea, a guide by 27 Press. So years ago, this publisher kind of reached out to me to ask me to kind of like review their like little guide to tea that they were putting together. And so they do kind of like credit me in this book, which was kind of cool. I do still get traffic to my blog from it every once in a while, so I guess it paid off. Tea is for Everyone by Manmo Media. This is a really great introduction to Chinese tea. Super well done. I'm a sucker for a hardcover book. The Philosophy of Tea by Tony Gebley. This has like your basic introductions to all the different types of tea, as well as different tea cultures around the world. Also by Tony Gebley, we have Tea, A User's Guide. This is absolutely one of the books I recommend for anyone who wants to learn more about tea. It's a very kind of more scientific approach to tea, more pragmatic, but definitely has so much information. I use it myself for a lot of reference points as well. Green Tea, A Quest for Fresh Leaf and Timeless Craft. This is by basically all of the owners of Camellia Sinensis Tea House in Canada. It's really just a super thorough introduction to green tea from different places. Includes recipes. They're also knowledgeable, and I really don't often see books dedicated to just a single type of tea, so I do really like the focus on green tea for this one. Every Day a Good Day by Noriko Morishita. This is one of my favorite books that I've read in recent years. Basically, it follows her journey learning the Japanese tea ceremony and, her trials and tribulations through all of that, from someone who really wasn't that interested in tea ceremony to someone who really became a true practitioner. Almost inspirational in the way that it's written. There was a movie made about this, and I've been trying desperately to find it with English translations, but I have not been able to find it just yet. Infused by Henrietta Lovell. This is one of my absolute favorite tea books. It's a very narrative style, 100% written in Henrietta's voice. Someone told me that she narrated the audiobooks, so I want to get that because I absolutely would love to just hear her read these stories. A lot of it is really just the different adventures that she's been on, as well as, how tea has helped her through some really difficult times in her life. I was lucky enough to meet her at a book signing in New York City, and she was exactly how you thought she would be just from reading this book. Stories of Japanese Tea by Zach Mangan. So Zach is the owner of Kettle, which is a Japanese tea specialty company that's based in New York City. They have a location in Brooklyn as well as in Manhattan. This 100% is a love letter to Japan and Japanese tea. Zach is very, very knowledgeable. I love that he includes so many interviews with the producers, so you really get to hear from their own, in their own words, why they love tea so much and, what's important to them. A growing section of my bookcase is Read 80 magazine. So this is a beautifully done, just really gorgeous magazine that's published quarterly, I believe. It's one of the only magazines I know of that's dedicated to tea, that's not about like afternoon tea. It's just anything and everything. Tea, though, is covered in these. A lot of the articles are super informative and also really interesting. They talk to tea people from all over the world. I highly recommend subscribing if you haven't already. The Ultimate Tea Lover's Treasury by James Norwood Pratt. This is really a classic among tea lovers. James Norwood Pratt has such a poetic style when he talks about tea. You can't help but feel excited when you read his writing. Tea, A Nerd's Eye View, Virginia Utermohlen Lovelace. This book really focuses on the scientific side of tea. Virginia is a scientist and incredibly knowledgeable. She's done quite a lot of study on tea, so there's a lot of things to pick up in here. I do find myself using it quite a lot to turn back to for reference things when I'm writing blog posts. Pour Tea by Wang Zhidong. So this is like the Appreciating Chinese Tea series. I found them on Amazon and they have a few different options. There's an oolong one, a green tea, but I happened to pick up the pour one. The translation is a little clunky on this one, but it does have some interesting information about pour, so definitely one to pick up if you'd like to learn more about that type of tea. I have A Social History of Tea by Jane Pettigrew and Bruce Richardson. So these are two of the biggest tea experts in the industry, and they work together on this book all about the social history of tea. So everything from, Shenong all the way up to today. Quite a lot of the book focuses on the Boston Tea Party and when tea was first brought to England. Definitely a great one for historical references. We have the Daily Tea bookazine. So the Daily Tea was a website that was kind of like an online magazine for tea. I wrote an article for it about my friend Suheki and the wonderful work she was doing to perform tea ceremonies where she donated the proceeds to tsunami victims in Japan. And they did a dedication to John Harney on the back because he had just recently passed at the time. Then we have The Art of Tea. So this is a magazine. I bought a whole bunch of copies from various places online when I first got into tea. It was really the first periodical I was able to find about tea. I really didn't understand half of what was in here when I first got into tea, but I hold on to them because they're really nostalgic for me of that period of my journey. Easy Leaf Tea by Timothy DeFay. So this is one of the owners of Postcards Teas. It has a variety of recipes as well as different brewing methods some of which I haven't really seen published in other books. So this is definitely one to check out if you like to make different drinks with tea. I have another book he wrote along with Michael Freeman called The Life of Tea, A Journey of the World's Finest Teas. So this is definitely like a big coffee table style book. Very beautifully done, stunning photographs throughout of their different journeys around the world sourcing tea. I have one of the only children's books I have about tea, Tea Time Around the World by Denise Weisbluth and Chelsea O'Byrne. It's really adorably illustrated, really a good one to pick up for any kids in your life who might be interested in your tea habit. Something tells me this is going to be one of my longest videos. I have The Book of Japanese Tea by Oscar Breckel. This book is interesting because it's in both Japanese and in English. I've been trying to learn Japanese over the last year, so I have to kind of go back to this and see if I might be able to pick up some of it. But Oscar is a really respected expert in Japanese tea. He lives in Japan, and I was lucky to have him sign this when he came to New York City. I have an issue of Masters Talks. So a few years ago at World Tea Expo, so I had the honor of judging the Tea Masters Cup. And so that was part of the International Tea Masters Cup. So I was able to get this beautiful magazine from the people who'd come over to assist us with running that. So this is another edition of The Book of Tea by Okakuro Kakuzo. This one done by Bruce Richardson, so it has an introduction from him. The other edition I have is much more of like a straightforward text only with just a few pictures, where this has some really stunning, beautiful color photographs to help illustrate everything that Okakuro Kakuzo was speaking about. Flowers and Tea, a collection of works by Alexander Ahern, most genuine tea people you will ever have the pleasure to meet. So it's a collection of his poems, and each poem is paired with a different tea along with different photographs and drawings. Just a really, really unique piece of work. If you enjoy poetry and you enjoy tea, I highly recommend it. The Enthusiast, Diatribes from the Devotee. This was written by Robert Godden. Some of you might know him as Lord Devotee, also a former tea blogger. Definitely someone whose writings I really enjoy. So I'm glad I still have this, even though the cover's a bit beat up because it's a little old there. I have The Korean Way of Tea, an introductory guide by Brother Anthony. and Hong Kyung-hee. There's not a lot of books available in the United States when it comes to Korean tea, so I picked this up to help me learn a bit more about that culture. Wild Tea Hunter by J.T. Hunter. This one's a little bit more fanatical. At the time, I definitely believed a lot of what was in this book. I think a book having a chapter called Industry Lies and Other BS is a little bit of a red flag. I have the Tea Enthusiast Handbook by Mary Lou Hayes and Robert J. Hayes. So this is also one of the first books I picked up on tea. I think I bought it from a Teavana at a mall store years and years ago. Definitely still a really great guide to different teas if you're looking to get started. We have Tea in the City by Elizabeth Knight. So this was like a little guide to tea places in New York City. Unfortunately, it's a bit old, so a lot of these places no longer exist. The good news is that there are lots of other tea places in New York City that have since replaced them. Korean Tea Classics is another one that was done by Brother Anthony. This is more of a translation of some older texts. I do really like that it lists both the Korean as well as the English translation. Grow Your Own Tea by Christine Parks and Susan M. Walcott. I have a couple of tea plants, so this has really been an invaluable guide for me. My oldest tea plant is about 2 years old now, so it's definitely helped me have it survive its first winter. We're now heading into its second. For All the Tea in China by Sarah Rose. I recently posted a short kind of discussing this a bit. Robert Fortune is a Scottish man who in the 18th century managed to go undercover in China and steal a bunch of tea and bring it to India, and that's how we got tea in Darjeeling. She basically took his journals and turned it into a historical narrative, which is much more entertaining than his original journals, so I highly recommend giving this a read if that story intrigues you at all. Tea, The Drink That Changed the World by Laura C. Martin. I originally picked up this book because my maiden name is Martin, so I was like, I would love to have a tea book with somebody with the same last name as me. Just kind of a brief overview of tea history from the beginning of when people started drinking tea up until today. This is my old copy of James Norman Pratt's New Tea Lover's Treasury. I brought this to World Tea Expo and asked him to sign it, and when he saw that it was such an old edition, he gave me the newer one that I showed earlier. The Way of Tea, The Sublime Art of Oriental Tea Drinking by Master Lam Can. So this is one of the first books I ever purchased that really even discussed Gong Fu brewing. So it was one that I really, went through a lot when I was first getting into making tea that way. The Classic of Tea by Lu Yu. So this is one of the oldest texts on tea that there is. It's interesting to read, doesn't necessarily have a lot of relevance to how we make tea today because things have changed so much over time, but it's really good to know where things came from. Modern Tea by Lisa Bolt Richardson. She covers everything from the different types of tea recipes, as well as some important topics like sustainability. Tea History, Terroir, and Varieties, also by the owners of Chameleon Sinensis Tea House in Canada. This is really your tea textbook. If you don't already have this book, I highly recommend it. Rather than reading it cover to cover, I recommend really flipping through it when you find a tea name that you're curious about or you're drinking a new tea. Flip to that page, read everything you can that's in there, and that'll really help you learn as you go. The New Tea Companion by Jane Pettigrew and Bruce Richardson. This is another real classic. They cover a lot of different types of tea as well as tea history and processing. Liquid Jade, The Story of Tea from East to West, Beatrice Hohenegger. This book was similar to a lot of the other ones where it's kind of like a basic introduction to the history and legends of tea. The Everything Healthy Tea Book by Babette Donaldson. I'm not usually one for promoting health benefits, but it is an important aspect of tea and part of why people do drink tea and enjoy it so much. And so if you're interested in health benefits of tea, this is definitely one for you to check out. This side of the bookshelf's all the heavy ones. Darjeeling by Jeff Kohler. This book covers the history of Darjeeling, but also does a lot of really important digging into the socioeconomic issues that affect the region today and the tea we drink from there. The Ancient Tea Horse Road by Jeff Fuchs. So he basically went on a trip to China where he tried to follow the ancient trade route where tea was traded for horses, and it's just a really fascinating adventure story. I really loved her learning about all the different people he encountered on his adventures. Tea by Christine Datner. This is one of the very first books about tea I bought, and I thought it was just a really cool edition. Is the cover ties, and then there's actually two separate books on the inside. So one is The History of Tea and one is The Taste of Tea. I actually reviewed this book for one of my very first blog posts ever, so it's one that I really just treasure because it's such a special memory. The Tea Book by Linda Gaylord. Linda is another fellow tea blogger. I love that I have so many books from my wonderful tea friends around the world. She's based in Canada. This is really a great introduction to tea. I especially love that she included American grown tea. It's a relatively new thing. I know from experience that it's difficult to get publishers to put that in a book because they feel like it's not something that's very timely or that will be long lasting, but I think it's really important, and so I'm glad that Linda put that in her book. The Soul and Spirit of Tea by Phil Cusino and Scott Chamberlain Hoyt. And so Soul and Spirit of Tea is a collection of different poems about tea. This one leans a little bit more on the spiritual side, so it's definitely one to check out if that's what you're interested in. The Story of Tea by Mary Lou Hayes and Robert J. Hayes. So another one that is an absolute classic for tea drinkers. It's one that was really important in the beginning of my journey of tea. Sometimes I have books sent to me because they're kind of vaguely related to tea. So I have The Tea Planter's Wife by Dinah Jeffries. So it does take place in part on a tea plantation, but it's a bit more of like a bodice ripper romance. Not necessarily my style, but there is tea involved somewhere. The World Atlas of Tea by Chrissy Smith. It covers the basics of tea as well as different tea regions. It's a bit of a smaller one, so it doesn't have every region, but there's definitely a lot to be learned there. The Art and Craft of Tea by Joseph Wesley Uhl. Joe owned a tea company that I absolutely adored. It really has a great overview of terroir processing, different types of tea. There's also quite a bit about brewing technique that I think a lot of people would find valuable. Culinary Tea by Cynthia Gold, Lee Stern. If you enjoy cooking with tea, this book is an absolute must. Cynthia Gold is one of the first tea sommeliers to really work in the restaurant world, so this is definitely one that you would want to check out. Matcha the Cookbook by Greta Schultz. They go into some of the basics of matcha, but it's mostly a recipe book. Matcha is often used with sweets, but I really like that they offered a lot of savory options as well. Matcha by Jessica Flint and Anna Cavaliunas. This book I picked up in a bookstore because the cover just absolutely caught my eye. I immediately, as soon as I saw it, just in the corner, I was like, I know that's tea, so I had to get it. It's a bit more of like a fluffier approach to matcha, I guess you could say. There is some good information in here, but it's more on the basic side. Jane Pettigrew's World of Tea. This book is an absolute, you can tell that a book has a lot of information when it comes with these ribbon bookmarks in it. It's extremely heavy, but this book really covers almost every tea region you could possibly think of. I've never seen one that's more thorough. Tea Sommelier by Gabriella Lombardi. So this is like a really beautiful coffee table style book. It mostly consists of really beautiful photographs and then tasting notes for different teas from around the world. The Tea Horse Road by Michael Freeman and Selena Ahmed. You might recognize Michael Freeman's name from the other book earlier with Timothy DeFay. So Michael is a photographer who seems to have quite an interest in tea, and Selena Ahmed is a scientist who does a lot of work when it comes to tea and climate change. This book focuses on the ancient Tea Horse Road. Selena's knowledge and research combined with Michael's beautiful photographs make for a really great journey. Definitely one that may take you a while because it's a fairly thick volume. All right, we're almost there. A Beginner's Guide to Japanese Tea by Oscar Breckel. The book I mentioned earlier, the Book of Japanese Tea, it's very, very similar to this one, just this one is only in English. One of the things I really like about Oscar's books is that he talks a lot about the different cultivars. That's not something I see covered often. Cha Dao by Solala Towler. This is one I picked up for a tea book club that I'm a member of. Time often gets away with me between work and everything else that I do, so I haven't gotten to this one yet. I'm looking forward to eventually reading it. Tasting Qualities, The Past and Future of Tea by Sarah Besky. So this one really focuses on a lot of the issues facing tea in India and places like Sri Lanka, where tea was really established through colonialism and the struggles of moving past that. Also defining what is quality when it comes to tea, because that's absolutely subjective and there's many different ways that you can approach that. Sarah Besky wrote another book on Darjeeling that was also incredibly insightful. Spill the Tea by William Dietz. So this is one I recently reviewed on the blog. I met William when he was a fellow tea blogger. He currently works for David's Tea, and this This book really helps to dispel a lot of the myths and misunderstandings that surround flavored tea. I highly recommend giving this a read even if you're not into flavored tea, as I think it's really important things for every tea drinker to know. Last but not least is the book I'm currently reading, Green Tea with Milk and Sugar by Robert Hellyer. This book was really interesting to me because before the World Wars, Americans were really big tea drinkers. So this book covers a lot of that history, why it changed, and how the Japanese tea industry changed because of that. I hope that you all liked getting to see my tea book collection. Let me know in the comments if you have any of these, if there's anything that you think I do need to add, even though I'm almost out of room. I would love to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.